On December 16, 1944, the winter skies over the Ardennes in eastern France and western Belgium were filled with a tense and unusually silent atmosphere. The snow-covered forests, which seemed to promise peace, in reality concealed a massive attack about to erupt, one that could change the course of the war in Europe. The German forces, under the direct command of Adolf Hitler, had assembled a colossal force of nearly 200,000 soldiers, 1,000 tanks, and almost 2,000 artillery pieces, all kept secret, hidden beneath the mist and rugged terrain of the Ardennes. The objective of this offensive, codenamed Operation Watch on the Rhine, was to split the Allied forces, retake Antwerp, the crucial logistical hub, and achieve a spectacular victory to shift the balance of power that was tipping toward the Allies. However, the Americans were completely unprepared for the scale of the threat. The Germans had chosen the Ardennes because it was considered a quiet sector, where many American units consisted either of inexperienced recruits or battle-hardened soldiers rotated in for rest and recovery after intense combat. This meant that when the first shots were fired, American forces in many positions were caught off guard, unprepared to respond to the overwhelming assault from the Germans. That morning, an unusual tension pervaded the defensive lines. German artillery roared to life, but what stunned the American soldiers was the speed, rhythm, and intensity of the bombardment. The Germans fired at a rate of 1,600 rounds per minute along an 85-kilometer front, creating a massive wall of fire that no soldier standing below could survive. This preparation achieved complete surprise, leaving many American units unable to implement standard defensive tactics. Amid the chaos, a small American reconnaissance unit, the 38th Cavalry Squadron, was facing continuous waves of attacks from elite German forces, including veterans of the Eastern Front with extensive combat experience. With limited numbers, scarce weapons, and dense forest terrain, conventional artillery or trench defenses were nearly useless. In such a situation, a single sound decision or a minor technological breakthrough could change the outcome of the entire battle. Colonel Oscar Axelson, commander of the 406th Artillery Group, faced an extremely difficult dilemma. He had to choose between following orders, using conventional artillery shells, or breaking protocol to test a secret weapon that had never before been used in combat. The decision was far from simple, as each proximity-fused shell was highly classified within the Allied forces, and unauthorized use could result in severe disciplinary action, even a military trial. But Colonel Axelson realized that if he followed orders and continued with conventional shells, the 38th Cavalry Squadron would be wiped out, allowing German forces to penetrate deep into American lines and potentially expand their gains. In that tense moment, he made a bold decision: to authorize the use of proximity-fused shells on ground targets, even though regulations only allowed their use for anti-aircraft purposes. This pivotal decision not only changed the course of the Ardennes battle, but also marked the dawn of a new era in modern warfare. When the American artillery opened fire, the results were immediate and devastating. German troops advancing in traditional formations, which had brought them victory on other fronts, found themselves completely exposed. The proximity-fused shells detonated in midair, 30 to 50 feet above the ground, showering the battlefield with steel fragments and rendering trenches, trees, and foxholes useless as protection. Soldiers who had survived years of combat on the Eastern Front now faced an entirely new form of lethality they could not comprehend. The power of the proximity-fused shell lay in the combination of science, engineering, and industry. Each shell contained a miniature radar system capable of detecting distance from the target and detonating at the optimal height. The system included 130 electronic components, among them 4 to 5 tiny vacuum tubes able to withstand 20,000 G of acceleration when fired from the gun. At the moment of firing, the extreme pressure and centrifugal force from the shell's rotation would destroy ordinary devices. But the vacuum tubes were protected by innovative cushioning systems, ensuring over 80% reliability. American scientists, led by Dr. Merle Tuve at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, spent years researching and developing these shells under security comparable to the Manhattan Project. At peak production, around 3% of America's top physicists participated in manufacturing and testing. Factories ran 24/7, producing one shell every 2 seconds, and by December 1944, output reached 40,000 shells per day. Back in the Ardennes, the impact of Colonel Axelson's decision was undeniable. German forces, whether regular or elite, were rapidly and catastrophically weakened. Battles at Bastogne, Sour River, and across the Ardennes forests saw German units virtually destroyed within minutes under the airburst of proximity-fused shells. Night movements or bad weather, tactics Germans had long used to avoid reconnaissance planes and American artillery, became useless. Each shell could detect and explode directly above enemy positions, turning any shelter into a deadly trap. The tactical impact of proximity-fused shells extended beyond physical destruction. It severely affected German morale. Many soldiers, including elite SS units, were completely demoralized. Some even ran toward American shells, seeking a quick death. Years of experience and skill in forest and field combat became meaningless against this new weapon. Beyond combat, the Ardennes battle demonstrated America's industrial superiority. More than 100 companies participated in shell production, from RCA and General Electric to Crossley Corporation and Emerson Radio, all under strict quality control. Every component was inspected, soldering examined under microscopes, and random samples test-fired to ensure survivability under real combat conditions. The combination of scientific, industrial, and tactical prowess created a revolutionary weapon that transformed the battlefield in the Ardennes and later across the entire Second World War. Despite meticulous planning and strong forces, the German attack failed to achieve its objectives. Many units were completely destroyed or disbanded, while the remaining forces were forced to retreat, leaving American defensive lines intact. The Ardennes battle became a clear demonstration that technology could determine the outcome of war, and that a bold decision combined with advanced weaponry could compensate for numerical or experiential disadvantages. The Ardennes was not only the place where Colonel Axelson created a turning point with the use of proximity-fused shells, but it also marked the beginning of the era of high-tech warfare, where science, radar, and mass production engineering became decisive factors in victory. The image of German soldiers shredded by showers of steel in the Ardennes forest, where they once thought themselves safe, stands as a vivid testament to the power of technological innovation in modern warfare. On the morning of December 16, 1944, amidst the tense atmosphere of the Ardennes, Colonel Oscar Axelson faced a situation that would give any officer pause. German forces from the 326th Volksgrenadier Division were advancing in traditional attack formations against the position of the 38th Cavalry Squadron, a small American reconnaissance unit. The Germans vastly outnumbered the Americans, and conventional artillery or existing trenches seemed incapable of stopping the enemy's advance. Every minute of delay could mean the annihilation of the entire American unit, creating a significant strategic gap on the Ardennes front. In that moment, Axelson thought of the proximity-fused shells, a top-secret weapon in the U.S. arsenal. These shells, officially restricted to anti-aircraft use, contained miniature radar systems capable of detecting the distance to a target and detonating at an optimal height. When they exploded, they rained steel fragments across the battlefield, rendering any shelter, from trenches to tree trunks to foxholes, useless. Using proximity-fused shells on infantry positions was a direct violation of orders, and Axelson fully understood that failure could result in severe disciplinary action or even a military trial. Yet he also understood that inaction would mean losing the entire position, allowing the Germans to expand their victory and potentially break through the entire Ardennes front. In that tense moment, Axelson made a bold move. He authorized American artillery to fire proximity-fused shells on ground targets, defying all prohibitions. This was a gamble, but one that would change the course of the Ardennes battle and leave a lasting mark in modern military history. As soon as the artillery opened fire, the results were unprecedentedly devastating for the Germans. Traditional attack formations, which had previously brought them victories on many fronts, were now rendered ineffective. The proximity-fused shells detonated 30 to 50 feet above the ground, creating a lethal zone more than 50 times larger than conventional shells, leaving German soldiers with nowhere to hide. Even veterans hardened by the brutal Eastern Front now faced a completely new form of lethality, leaving them horrified and disoriented. The effect of the proximity-fused shells went beyond physical destruction. They shattered German morale. Many soldiers, including elite SS units, watched comrades ripped apart by the falling steel fragments. Some completely lost emotional control, fleeing or even running directly toward the American guns, seeking a quick death in despair. This panic prevented attack formations from maintaining discipline, and many German units disintegrated within minutes under the airburst fragments. A particularly remarkable effect was seen in the Ardennes forests. The dense woodland, which the Germans believed would conceal them from American artillery, became a deadly trap. When shells detonated above the treetops, wood fragments from the branches flew at extreme speeds, acting as additional lethal projectiles, multiplying the destructive effect. Traditional forest tactics, using large trees for cover or digging under roots, became useless. German forces, who had believed they had an advantage in woodland combat, were forced to face a new reality. All previous combat experience was rendered ineffective against this technological power. Technically, the proximity-fused shell was a marvel of American science and industry. Each shell contained 130 electronic components, including miniature vacuum tubes capable of withstanding $20,000 G of acceleration, centrifugal forces, and extreme heat when fired from a cannon. The miniature radar system continuously emitted waves, reflected off ground objects, and when the signal reached a preset threshold, detonation occurred, producing an optimal airburst damage zone. American scientists, led by Dr. Merle Tuve, spent years developing and testing this technology under Manhattan Project-level secrecy. At Monshaw, when American artillery fired, the results were near-instant German disintegration. German soldiers were struck wherever they took cover, in trenches, behind trees, even in foxholes they believed would protect them. It was a clear demonstration of the power of technology. A small weapon with catastrophic effect could change the outcome of an entire battle. The tactical advantage of the proximity-fused shells extended beyond destruction. American gunners no longer needed direct observation or precise aiming because each shell determined its optimal detonation point automatically. This allowed continuous artillery fire even in fog or darkness. Previously, artillery units relied on forward observers. Now, technology made cannons highly precise and lethal regardless of environmental conditions. The Battle of Monshaw was the first proof of the power of integrating science, industry, and tactics. A bold decision by a single officer, combined with advanced technology, halted an overwhelming attack, saved hundreds of American lives, and created a strategic turning point in the Ardennes. For the first time in history, technology directly influenced the outcome of a battle, not only in terms of casualties, but also in morale and combat effectiveness of the enemy. Subsequent battles, from Bastogne to Sour River, demonstrated the devastating effects of proximity-fused shells, but Monshaw remained the first defining moment, where Axelson's decision showcased the power of technological innovation paired with tactical decisiveness. Even elite, highly trained German soldiers experienced total panic, realizing that decades of combat experience were worthless against a weapon they could not comprehend. Monshaw also exemplified how a single individual could change history through a bold choice. Colonel Axelson, with courage and tactical acumen, defied orders but protected American lives and slowed the German advance. What happened at Monshaw laid the groundwork for the widespread use of proximity-fused shells throughout the Ardennes, from Bastogne to other battlefields, causing German formations to disintegrate before reaching American defensive lines. Beyond the immediate battlefield impact, Monshaw highlighted the importance of advanced technology in modern warfare. Proximity-fused shells were not just a new weapon. They symbolized the integration of scientific research, technical innovation, mass industrial production, and flexible tactics. A daring decision, combined with cutting-edge technology, revolutionized infantry warfare, fundamentally changing how armies respond to artillery and firepower. By the end of the Battle of Monshaw, it was clear that Axelson A.'s decision and the firing of proximity-fused shells had ushered in a new era of warfare. Traditional German attack formations, which had secured victories across many fronts, were now ineffective against the destructive power from above. The combination of fighting spirit, advanced technology, and decisive action created an undeniable turning point, making Monshaw a vivid demonstration that science and technology could determine the outcome of war within minutes. As the artillery barrages at Monshaw threw German units into panic and disarray, American forces realized that proximity-fused shells were not just a weapon. They were a strategic tool capable of completely transforming the Ardennes battlefield. The next demonstration of this weapon's power came at Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne Division was entirely surrounded by large and elite German forces. Bastogne was a critical crossroads, a vital route for the German offensive. The Americans, limited in numbers and encircled, seemed to have only the option of holding out until reinforcements arrived. But thanks to artillery support, particularly the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, equipped with 75mm attack howitzers firing proximity-fused shells, the situation changed entirely. From December 19 to 31, the 463rd fired a total of 7,676 rounds, and the proximity-fused shells created devastating zones of destruction, causing German attacks to collapse almost entirely before reaching American defensive lines. The combination of powerful firepower and proximity technology produced a terrifying psychological effect on the Germans. Attack formations trained for coordinated tactics suddenly became powerless. German soldiers, even those seasoned by years of combat, watched comrades shredded by airburst shells and found no cover, plunging them into panic and disrupting their ability to coordinate. The destructive power of the proximity-fused shells caused units to disintegrate within the opening moments of combat, creating tactical gaps swiftly exploited by the Americans. Not only at Bastogne, but the Battle of Sour River from December 25-26 also demonstrated the lethal effectiveness of proximity-fused shells. A German battalion attempted to cross a partially frozen river, believing darkness and fog would shield them from American artillery. In reality, U.S. guns fired proximity-fused shells without direct observation, striking the German formation with precision and showering them with steel and wood fragments from the trees. By the end of the battle, 702 German soldiers had been killed, a figure providing one of the clearest measures of the shell's destructive power. One battalion was almost wiped out in minutes, while other units witnessing the carnage retreated in fear. A notable effect was the spread of devastation in the Ardennes forests. The dense woods, which the Germans had assumed would protect them from observation and artillery, became deadly traps. When proximity-fused shells detonated above the treetops, wood fragments flew at extreme velocities, combining with the steel to create a 360-degree lethal zone. A single 155mm shell bursting above the canopy could devastate an area the size of a tennis court, rendering any form of cover useless. Even German soldiers skilled in forest combat had no safe refuge. The effectiveness of proximity-fused shells was also evident in American artillery units. For instance, The 969th Artillery Battalion, mostly composed of black soldiers under Lieutenant Colonel Hubert D. Barnes, used 155 midair howitzers firing proximity-fused shells to establish lethal zones around Bastogne. Approaching German forces encountered an aerial wall of fire they could not penetrate. Attack formations broke apart, many soldiers fled in panic, and some even threw themselves into the snow to escape the bombardment. The psychological impact of the shells extended even to elite German units. SS forces under Colonel Otto Skorzeny, who had successfully conducted daring missions such as rescuing Mussolini or nearly capturing Tito, suffered severe losses. When they approached Malmedy on December 21st, they encountered precision fire from proximity-fused shells, rendering camouflage tactics useless. Some elite SS soldiers lost all combat effectiveness, either choosing to end their lives quickly or fleeing, demonstrating the terrifying psychological power of this weapon. The technology behind this power was a marvel of American industry and science. Proximity-fused shells were produced by hundreds of U.S. companies, from RCA, Sylvania, and General Electric to Crosley Corporation and Emerson Radio, all of which converted civilian production lines to military manufacturing. Each component and solder joint was rigorously inspected, and random test rounds were fired to ensure performance under combat conditions. Production achieved one shell every 2 seconds, with quality standards surpassing anything previously achieved. Tactically, proximity-fused shells transformed American artillery from a supporting weapon into a decisive force. Previously, artillery units required forward observers to adjust fire, but the shells automatically determined the optimal detonation point, allowing precise firing even in fog, darkness, or inclement weather. This not only amplified physical destruction, but also created a fearsome psychological effect, forcing German troops to move in constant terror with no safe cover. In subsequent battles, from Bastogne to Sour River and other Ardennes forests, proximity-fused shells continued to prove that technology could determine the fate of military units within minutes. Even large elite attack formations could not withstand the raining steel and wood from above, and traditional German tactics became useless. This was a vivid demonstration of the combination of science, engineering, and tactics, a turning point in the history of warfare. The shell's effect went beyond immediate battlefield results. They caused panic, disrupted coordination, and altered the morale of German units across the Ardennes. Even SS troops, trained for extreme conditions, could not withstand their power. As a result, attacks were halted, American defensive positions were preserved, and German campaigns in the Ardennes suffered significant setbacks. The tactical, psychological, and technological impact of proximity-fused shells at Bastogne and Sour River demonstrated an essential principle. Technological innovation, when combined with bold decisions and flexible tactics, can determine the outcome of a war. Monshaw was only the beginning, but Bastogne and Sour River showcased the weapon's far-reaching and strategic effects. These achievements also highlighted the excellence of American industry. Factories producing proximity-fused shells, mostly staffed by women working 12-hour days, 6 days a week, often did not know what weapon they were manufacturing, yet every item contributed to reshaping the battlefield. Quality control was absolute. Every component, solder joint, and electronic element was carefully inspected and any deviation discarded. Thanks to these strict procedures, the shells achieved over 80% effectiveness under combat conditions, an extraordinary figure for technology of the era. Additionally, production efficiency dramatically reduced costs. In 1942, each shell cost over $700, more than a year's wage for a worker, but by late 1944, mass production and streamlined processes cut the cost to about $18 per shell while maintaining quality. With affordable, high-volume production, the U.S. could deploy hundreds of thousands of shells during the Ardennes campaign, completely surprising German forces who had no time to prepare countermeasures. The effectiveness of proximity-fused shells at Bastogne went beyond damage and psychological impact. They allowed American units to maintain continuous defense, regardless of time or weather. Previously, Germans exploited night, fog, or snow to move and attack without fear of artillery fire. Proximity-fused shells eliminated this safe window. Even in poor visibility, American guns could strike enemy formations accurately, rendering German maneuver tactics useless. At Sauer River, when a German battalion attempted to cross the partially frozen river, they were unaware of the overwhelming U.S. firepower with proximity-fused shells. The entire formation was obliterated within minutes, with 702 soldiers killed, a number that would shock any army. Remaining units lost morale, retreated, and abandoned their attack plans. This exemplified the combination of technology and psychological effect, preventing German forces from maintaining discipline or traditional tactics. Beyond destructive power, proximity-fused shells demonstrated the importance of technology in reshaping tactics and combat morale. Skills once considered fundamental, organizing attack formations, hiding in forests, or using terrain for defense, became useless. German soldiers realized there was no way to protect themselves, even while following traditional combat principles. Another example of psychological impact occurred when elite SS units under Skorzeny attempted to assault Malmedy. These soldiers had previously executed extremely hazardous missions successfully, but faced with proximity-fused shells, they were completely helpless against the precision and lethality from above. Some ran toward American positions to end their lives quickly. Others fled in panic. This clearly demonstrated that technology could break the discipline and fighting spirit even of elite troops. Moreover, proximity-fused shells created a cascading effect across the Ardennes. Deployed widely, they forced Germans to move and attack in constant fear, eliminating safe zones or rest windows. This caused tactical breakdowns, with many units disintegrating before reaching American defensive lines. From Bastogne to Sauer River and other Ardennes forest battles, proximity-fused shells proved that a small yet sophisticated technology could reshape the entire battlefield. Strategically, these battles helped maintain critical American defensive positions, protect key crossroads and supply lines, and slow the German advance, allowing other U.S. forces to concentrate for counterattacks. Consequently, German campaigns in the Ardennes were severely disrupted, and they failed to achieve their initial strategic objectives of dividing and destroying American forces in the region. From an industrial and scientific perspective, the success of proximity-fused shells demonstrated the power of combining advanced research with mass production. Hundreds of American companies, from electronics manufacturers to consumer goods producers, converted production lines to manufacture highly precise shells. Workers, mostly women, labored with maximum focus, often unaware of the weapon they were producing. This discipline and dedication ensured the final product met the highest quality standards, directly contributing to battlefield results. Another key point was economic and production efficiency. Initially costing over $700 per shell, optimization reduced the price to $18 by late 1944 without sacrificing quality. This allowed the U.S. to produce millions of shells quickly and deploy 200,000 during the Ardennes campaign, creating continuous, overwhelming firepower across the front. Looking back at Bastogne and Sauer River, it is clear that proximity-fused shells did more than alter battle outcomes. They changed how war was conducted. They transformed artillery from a support weapon into a decisive force, enabling Americans to control the battlefield even while surrounded or in adverse weather. They forced Germans to abandon traditional tactics or suffer heavy losses and created a psychological impact unmatched by any prior weapon. In summary, Bastogne and Sauer River were not only tactical battles, but also demonstrations of the power of technology in modern warfare. Proximity-fused shells showed that the combination of science, industry, and bold human decisions could reshape the battlefield within minutes. They produced psychological and tactical effects that German forces could neither predict nor counter, allowing the Americans to hold key strategic positions and erode enemy morale. After the battles at Bastogne, Sour River, and numerous other hotspots across the Ardennes, it became clear that proximity-fused shells had completely transformed the battlefield of the Ardennes offensive, also known as the Battle of the Bulge. They were not merely a more powerful weapon. They turned artillery from a supporting tool into a decisive strategic factor, rendering Germany's elite assaults ineffective against the scientific power of the United States. This development not only marked a turning point in the Ardennes, but also shaped the way modern warfare would be conducted in the future. In late December 1944, when German forces peaked at nearly 200,000 troops, 1,000 tanks, and almost 2,000 artillery pieces during Operation Watch on the Rhine, they believed traditional tactics would bring swift victory. However, the deployment of 200,000 proximity-fused shells disrupted German formations and attacks, while creating a continuous lethal zone that German units could not evade. Technological superiority was also evident in the shell's ability to function under all combat conditions. Previously, artillery could only fire accurately with forward observers, and effectiveness plummeted in darkness, rain, fog, or snow. But thanks to integrated mini-radars, proximity-fused shells automatically determined the optimal detonation point, annihilating attacking formations even without direct observation. This was a revolutionary change. Artillery was no longer limited by line of sight or weather but became a 24/7 threat, leaving the Germans with no safe refuge. The psychological impact was equally profound. German troops, particularly elite units such as the SS Panzer divisions or Scorzini's special forces, panicked under the unpredictable destructive power. Reports noted cases of SS soldiers trained to endure the harshest conditions, fleeing or even throwing themselves into danger to escape aerial bombardment. This illustrated the unprecedented psychological effect of proximity-fused shells, which decimated not only the body but also the morale of German forces. On the American side, the deployment of proximity-fused shells showcased extraordinary industrial and organizational capability. Over 100 companies participated, including RCA, Sylvania, General Electric, Crosley Corporation, and Emerson Radio. Hundreds of thousands of workers, mostly women, worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, under strict security protocols, often unaware of what they were producing. Yet every shell had to meet the highest standards of precision and durability. Proximity-fused shells achieved over 80% operational effectiveness under combat conditions, a near-impossible feat for technology of the era. Production costs also fell dramatically due to mass production and process optimization. In 1942, each shell cost more than $700. But by late 1944, the price dropped to 18s, enabling the U.S. to produce millions of shells and deploy 200,000 during the Battle of the Bulge. This allowed continuous overwhelming firepower across the Ardennes, leaving Germany unable to react or develop effective countermeasures. The strategic impact of proximity-fused shells was unmistakable. They thwarted Hitler's primary objective in the Ardennes, to divide and destroy American forces at key crossroads. With superior destructive power and accuracy in all conditions, German attacks were neutralized, American defensive positions held, and reinforcements had time to arrive. This shifted the battlefield from the brink of collapse to resolute defense and ultimately counterattack. A notable example was the defensive line at Elsenborn Ridge, where the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions held strategic positions against the 6th SS Panzer Army, including elite units such as the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. From December 17, 19, U.S. forces fired 160,000 rounds, approximately 25% of them proximity fused. These shells caused 60% of total German casualties, proving that a small fraction of the total firepower produced outsized tactical and psychological effects. German formations, despite their size and elite training, vanished within minutes under a rain of steel and wood. Proximity-fused shells also proved invaluable in counterattacks. General Patton's Third Army used them as breakthrough weapons, firing multiple units simultaneously so that shells would detonate at the same time on enemy formations. This time-on-target technique created a massacre effect the Germans called the bell toll of death. Between December 22, 29, Third Army fired 50,000 proximity-fused shells, breaking German defensive lines and opening a supply corridor to Bastogne. In the long term, proximity-fused shells left a profound technological legacy. The miniaturized vacuum tubes within the shells became the foundation for modern electronics, from satellites to radar systems. Strict quality control processes became the standard for mass production in many industries, and the concept of sensors determining actions autonomously became the basis for guided missiles and modern smart weapons. All modern weapon systems relying on sensors and automation can trace their lineage directly to proximity-fused shells. Warfare, therefore, entered the technological era, where science, industry, and tactical decisions converged to create decisive battlefield advantages. Proximity fuses demonstrated that the power of science could surpass numerical strength or traditional tactics, and that those possessing superior technology could fundamentally change the outcome of war. The final result of the Battle of the Bulge underscores this. German forces suffered approximately 100,000 casualties, while the U.S. lost 75,000, including 19,000 dead. Without proximity-fused shells, American losses could have been far higher. The Ardennes campaign might have lasted longer, and the liberation of concentration camps would have been delayed, resulting in additional victims. Every day shortened in battle by this technology potentially saved thousands of lives. Looking back, the story of proximity-fused shells is not only about a weapon but also a lesson in the convergence of science, industry, and tactics. It proves that in modern warfare, innovation and bold tactical decisions can determine the fate of a battle or even an entire conflict. From Colonel Axelson's first unauthorized use on December 16, 1944, to the deployment of hundreds of thousands of shells across the Ardennes, proximity fuses redefined how humans fight, survive, and endure on the battlefield. The Battle of the Bulge ended on January 25, 1945, with a complete German retreat. Hitler's final attempt failed, costing roughly 100,000 troops without achieving any objective. The U.S. lost 75,000. But proximity-fused shells protected many lives and maintained critical defensive lines, helping shorten the war and reduce humanitarian catastrophe. Eisenhower noted that if Germany had possessed proximity-fused shells, D-Day might have been extremely difficult or impossible, underscoring the strategic significance of this weapon. Post-war, the principles of proximity-fused technology were widely applied in electronics, radar, sensors, and smart weapons. Miniaturization, quality control, and automation became new standards in research and production. Concepts used today in guided missiles, UAVs, and smart artillery trace directly back to proximity-fused shells. The era of high-tech warfare began in the Ardennes, where shells that could decide when to detonate altered military formations and shaped the future of global conflict. Thus, the story of proximity-fused shells in the Battle of the Bulge is not only a military triumph, but also a symbol of the convergence of science, industry, and tactics, proving that technology and human intellect can determine history. From the cold Ardennes forests, the world entered a new era of warfare, where smart weapons and precise firepower reshaped how humans survive and fight.